Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wednesday's episode of Trending, brought to you by Iconic Coffee. Head over to shop.iconic.com and use the code TRENDING to get 10% off. Rich, how you doing this morning, mate?
I'm good, mate. It's good to see you. How are you?
I'm very good, mate. Very, very good. So much to talk about. That's normally your line, but we've talked about the protests in LA for the last few days, but that seems to now have spread to other cities across the US and indeed other countries. There's protests and civil unrest in Northern Ireland, in Southern Ireland, in Austria, as a result of yesterday's terror attack in the country in Vienna. And now major cities across the US, including Chicago, New York, about 3 or 4 others I can't even think off the top of my head now. But they're basically sending in the military, the National Guard, as we've seen in California. They're doing that now in other states and other cities, including Texas, which is predominantly a Republican state. So it's very clear that this civil unrest is being orchestrated. Now, I said this yesterday, and someone commented on an X post I put up saying, I think you're giving them too much credit to think they're orchestrating absolutely every aspect of this. And I think it's very important to point out, I'm not saying they're orchestrating every aspect of this in terms of this protester's doing this protester's doing that. But human behavior is quite easy to predict. If you do something, you know what kind of response you're going to get. I think everyone watching this can quite confidently predict how certain people, or most people, will respond to any given situation. So if you prod someone consistently, they're going to react at some point. So you don't need to orchestrate absolutely every aspect of the protest. You just need to create an environment where you know something is going to be triggered and something is going to kick off, which is exactly what we've seen here across LA, now San Francisco, other areas of California, and widespread across the states. So basically what we're seeing now is a curfew being put in across Los Angeles between 8 p.m. and 6 p.m. where you can't be in a certain central district within Los Angeles. This has been enforced by the governor, Gavin Newsom, who seems to be having some kind of pissing match with Donald Trump, which is quite pathetic. You've got two people who are supposedly elected leaders and adults that are having some kind of media spat and threatening each other with legal action. I mean, whenever you need some grown-ups, guys, it's in a situation like this. Instead, you've got two children, which is embarrassing because both of them probably have their own children. So what we're seeing essentially is this unrest continue and the fallout of it get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the reason this is important is interesting to get your take on this, Rich. For me, I feel like this is a very similar tactic, or a very similar tactic will be used to what we saw here in the UK following the Southport riots, which is, I would expect, because Donald Trump is many things, but he's certainly a very arrogant man with a very fragile ego. He'll need to crush this. This is not, the longer this carries on, the weaker it makes him look. He'll need to get in there and show everyone who's boss. That's his attitude, because he's got, a very fragile ego, as I said. What that'll act as a deterrent for civil unrest in the future, whether that's violent or non-violent, it'll also act as a bit of a warning to people. We saw the same with Southport, didn't we, where there was protests and there was also things said online, both of which have resulted in people having very harsh jail sentences. It's now led people to think a bit more before they say and do certain things. For me, this is America's version of that. He's going to come in very heavy-handed, claiming that, we need to shut this down for this, and this reason. And I don't believe in violent protests. We've made that very clear. But it will then lead to probably legislation change and probably fallout further down the line, which will make people more terrified to speak out. I don't know what you think, mate. Isn't there something in that?
All of that and the above, absolutely. I mean, he's holding back now. You can see him holding himself back to the point it reaches, in my opinion, an apex of... Yeah. They need to build this up, and we'll come to the second story soon of why they need to build this up. And it's quite evident and quite clear problem, reaction, solution. I don't understand why people aren't pointing this out on the mass. I suppose they're not supposed to in the alternative media, especially large segments. They keep blaming the Democrats, which is absurd. They haven't been in for 6-7 months. And also they're blaming immigration, obviously. You have agent provocateurs in there. This has been done 10 to a dozen, same old plays. Black Lives Matter thing was the same. They even put the bricks on the streets and all of that nonsense and all that madness. It's the same old play, and people keep regurgitating this stuff. And it's not actually the people at home who are sitting and watching it. It's this whole industry of performance art. You could say that's what it is. It's performance art, street art, where they just drag in like a nucleus drags in all of this energy and other people start joining it. But it's totally orchestrated. You orchestrate something from the beginning, you set the band down to orchestrate the song, and other people start joining in and singing along. It's not that hard. You don't need to get every single person to be in on it. That's absurd. Some people have genuine anger. They just find a pressure point. So we know these things. So it's quite obvious to me a problem, reaction, solution that Donald Trump's waiting for this apex. So the question that we probably should ask ourselves is what happened before this to make this a necessity?
Yeah.
Well, wasn't it only a few weeks back that a certain company was brought in and there was a lot of kickback on this company because of their surveillance, CIA cutout assets and the fact that they are a CIA database?
100%.
This is the reason.
Well, this is part of the Trump presidency and probably why he was the chosen one, because what he will do, and you're going to come to this story in a second, what he will do is he will get people to accept something that they wouldn't have accepted if the Democrats had done it, because organizations like the one we're about to discuss have been long warned about by people who are open-minded and people who question the narrative. And all of a sudden now you've got a situation where people are actually calling for it. And there's been a number of quite high-profile Republican commentators calling for the use of this technology. You've also got the AI furthering under the Trump administration, where if it was under organizations under the Biden or Harris administration, had there been one, then there would have been more questions asked, a lot more questions asked. So we won't tease anymore. Let's move on to what this organization is. I think you can probably figure that one out for yourselves, guys. So Rich, where are we going, mate?
Yeah, if you can't figure it out yourself, one day they'll just put it directly into your brain anyway. Palantir's partnership with ICE deepens. I mean, what are the chances? So just before all this started, Donald Trump ushered in Palantir. We know Peter Thiel funded Trump many years back in his first run. Elon Musk was in business with Peter Thiel at PayPal, I believe, and now he funds Trump, and they had a pretend fallout a few weeks ago, WWE style. So this is from, I believe, April of this year. Palantir, the Denver-based data software giant, is building a new tool protocol to provide immigration and customs enforcement with ICE, with enhanced capabilities to support deportation efforts, federal documents show. What are the chances? 30 million contract in April of this year. They asked Palantir to provide an immigrations OS software for this very situation. It's not hard to figure out. And I've been posting these things on the likes of InfoWars for the last few days. And they still want to blame George Soros and the Democrats. They know full well that this is exactly what it is, because it's such an easy play that even my 5-year-old son pointed it out to me. Why it matters. The company has been an ICE contractor for more than a decade. So they go way back. So ICE have been connected to the CIA, going well back, spanning the Obama and Biden administrations, but its new scope of work signals an escalating role in immigration enforcement under President Trump. Of course it would, because he's funded by Peter Thiel and the likes. Driving the new news in mid-April, so it was April this year, ICE awarded Palantir a $30 million contract to deliver a new platform, the Immigration Lifecycle Operation System, Immigration OS, by September the 25th per federal records. So they've got to get it in soon. What are the chances, hey Jay?
Good question, mate. What are the chances? Absolutely. It's very clear to see, and this was spoken about before this administration came in. If you convince people that the problem, the deep state, is the left, then they won't notice when the right are the ones bringing it in, which is exactly what we've seen here. You know, we've seen situations where if any other administration was doing this, people would be shouting from the rooftops. But this just goes to show how powerful the psychological trick that's been played on people is, where they think their guy's in charge. So as a result, everything's fine. Things that they know inherently are wrong, and they knew 2 years ago were wrong, because they think their guy's doing it, then it's fine all of a sudden. It's just, I really can't quite comprehend it, to be honest. And the mental gymnastics and 25D chess that's being played by these people, or claimed that's being played by Trump, is I don't get how much longer people can justify this in their minds. I would suggest a lot of people privately are going, I've messed up here.
Yeah.
But publicly are maybe not ready to say that yet, because as we've spoken about in the past, it's a human disease that people don't like to admit that they are wrong. And I understand that, but the only way to ever evolve is to admit that you were wrong. Because you're not right about everything. No one's right about everything.
Of course we're not.
If you stay stubborn and belligerent in your beliefs, in your anything really, whatever it is, in the face of very, very damning information that the way that you're conducting yourself or the things that you believe are not right, then the only person that's going to suffer at the end of the day is you. However, when it comes to stories and things involving organizations and so on like this, it doesn't just affect you, because they're sleepwalking the entire world in a certain direction. And through the ignorance and the silent compliance of many, many people, even people that see it are being taken along that road. So this is why it's very, very important to say what you believe, even in the face of adversity. And as you know, Rich, whether it be the two of us, Gareth, David, taken pelters across social media for speaking out on these things 6 to 9 months ago before it became a point. And even now, you get in stick because people don't want to see it, even though it's literally in their face. You know, the Grim Reaper's at their door and they're still saying it's not there. So I'm at the point now, mate, where I think he is so, and the administration is so arrogant that they're just going to soldier on with things like this and not really give any consideration to the fact that it might look bad, because they're in their second term. They can't get in again. What's the worst that's going to happen? You've got him for another 3 years, no matter what happens.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think another aspect of that, in terms of what we do for a living, is that some of these podcasts, these ones that have been elevated, were put in place to do this from the start, in my opinion. I don't see how you can't think the alternative media is just you need the yin and the yang, you need the left and the right. Some of them won't be. A vast majority of them have built their reputation, their channels, their followers, their and their income on pushing this narrative that Trump's the savior. They can't afford to lose that audience, which they would straight away. And they would be demoted, shadow banned, and they would lose their income. Yep. So now they've become reliant on Trump.
Yep.
Their whole business is built around this guy. They know it's not true. Anyone who's got, an IQ above a 6-year-old knows that this isn't true. But now, what do you do when your entire income relies upon pushing something that you've now found out to be a lie? That's the danger that you come to when you hook your wagon to something specific and don't tell the truth across the board. Now you're locked in, and he knows that. Trump will know that he's got the support now of the alternative media and the support of the tech companies that push the narrative of only some alternative media.
Yeah, well, that's a very famous saying, isn't it? It's very difficult to get a man to see something when his salary depends on him not seeing it. And that is the situation that we are in, where, as you say, and we've spoken about this before, you can apply it to lots of examples. Dependency creates control. If you're dependent on something or someone, then they own you. And that's the situation that we're seeing. And you see some of the people in these big alternative media, profiles and stuff. You look at the lifestyles they lead. Well, they live pretty nice lifestyles, which are going to need maintaining, and they're going to become accustomed to, and they're not going to want that to go away. So, once you get to a certain level, you're going to want to do everything you can to keep that level. And that's unfortunately the situation we're seeing. And integrity doesn't seem to play much of a part in the mindsets of lots of these people. And I think, you could argue that anyone that gets an enormous profile and gets lots of people telling them how brilliant they are and stuff, you've got to have the right kind of people around you to not let that go to your head and then let that skew your views, which I would suggest that happens to a lot of well-known people, probably many people that become well-known for any kind of reason, whether that's sport, whether that's the arts, whether that's media and so on, probably weren't too bad people when they got into it, and then all of a sudden they get very easily corrupted and pulled into that cycle. And I'd suggest the alternative media, the people that we're talking about, there's probably a bit of a demographic of a few of them. Some that know exactly what they're doing and they've been there from the start. They've been biding their time. Some that probably had honest intentions at some point and now all of a sudden have been taken on the journey. I would suggest, not that I know him, that Alex Jones probably would fall into that category. And then some like us who are still saying what we believe to be right and taking the consequences as a result. But integrity is something you only have once. You can't get it back once it's gone. So, right, we're moving on to another story here from the UK. Now, the UK, there's going to be a lot of stories, and I'm going to cover one this afternoon on Trending in the Afternoon, because we're expecting an announcement from the UK Chancellor at 12 o'clock today about government spending over the next 3 years. So there's going to be a lot coming out of the UK over the next few days and today related to finance and related to money. But this is a story from this morning to do with first-time buyers here in the UK. So the dream you are sold in life is that you leave school, you go to university, you get a job, you meet someone, in your early 20s, you settle down, you buy a house, you have a family. That's the dream. That's how you're sold, right? So years ago, that could happen. Years ago, one of you would have gone to work and you could have afforded to buy a house, possibly. Two of you went to work, you could definitely afford to buy a house. And I'm not talking about going to work and working high-level six-figure salaries. I'm talking about going and working to what you would consider very regular jobs. You could afford to buy properties. I've got a card on my desk someone got me for my birthday last year, which details the average situation of different things, like what was number one and all that the year I was born. The average salary in this country was £22,000. The average house price was £88,000.
Right.
That goes to show it, right? So the average house price was 4 times the average salary in a year. The average house price in the UK today is nearly £300,000, and the average salary is 30. Do the maths, 10 times versus 4 times. So it's no surprise people can't afford to buy houses. Or if they can, they're buying them much later in life. So this story is here from, this is money.co.uk. Surge in first-time buyers over 45 will land millions with a mortgage in retirement. Now, your mortgage is, obviously you buying your house, you paying it back and paying the bank an extortionate amount in interest, to the point that most people probably pay back at least half their price of their house again, if not double the price of their house by the time they've paid it off. But it's going to take that into pensions, into retirement, when you should be owning everything and enjoying the fruits of your labour in the last few years of your life with relative comfort. Yet we're seeing so many attacks on the elderly. We've talked about winter fuel payments. We've talked about the over technical. Can't even say that word. I'm not sure that is a word. The increase in technology, which is making older people feel more and more outcast. The division between young and old that we're seeing politically, where the older to blame and the young people need to are the ones we should be focused on. So there's been a demonization of elderly people. That's very clear to see, when they're the ones that built the country. They're the ones that raised the adults that we're seeing now. It's very, very clear that there's a demonization of them, which is incredibly sad. But the fact you're going to see millions, not a few, millions potentially having to pay off mortgages well into their retirement ages when they're living on pensions and not working, this is just going to lead more and more people to having the last few years of their life in poverty, where people are either going to have to live with families for longer or live with families completely, not going to be able to buy houses at all. This kind of ties in, I think, Rich, me and Gaz spoke yesterday, we spoke about Richard Day a little bit, Dr. Richard Day, and the things that he spoke about in his speech all those years ago. And he spoke about the demise pill. We spoke about the concept that once you got to a certain age, you'd have dinner with your family and you'd go and take a demise pill. Now, that sounds very far-fetched to many people. However, if you add in all the attacks on the elderly that are making them feel more and more ostracized from society, the financial attacks on the elderly, the freezing of the elderly through the cutting of winter fuel payments, you then add in this massive explosion in the narrative around assisted suicides and euthanasia. It's quite... If you add them all together, in isolation, they may not look particularly, important. But if you add them all together, it's very clear that I think they're trying to do one or two things. They're trying to make elderly feel so disenfranchised and so what's the point, that they are supportive of assisted dying, to the point that it's like, right, I've had my life. It's only downhill from here. I'm out. And also, you're going to get the younger people looking at it going, well, they're a drain on society because they can't do this, they can't do that. We're having to fund them through pensions. I have to have my parents live with me because they can't afford their own. So many things that could be potentially manipulated in people's psychology to look at the elderly as they don't need to be here anymore. I think that's a real clear agenda that we're seeing. And when you look at the writings and the speeches of certain people, they talk about the elderly being a problem. So what's your take, mate?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's so many angles they could take this, as per usual. They can weaponize anything. So you've got this whole suicide pods. I think it's in Sweden or Switzerland or something like
Switzerland,
that.
yeah.
Switzerland, yeah. I mean, that's absurd, but I get that they sell it to you as people that are not well and they can take their own life. And I get that to a certain degree. I'm not either one way or the other. It's on an individual basis. But it's clear to see that your elder age is not, as Elon Musk puts it, the input-output ratio isn't there. You're not putting anything in. You're taking out at that point.
Useless eaters, Kissinger called them, didn't he?
Basically, yeah. But regardless of the fact they're missing there, the fact that you've put in for 70 plus years of your life already and now you're reaping the benefits, that's not really something that they can quite grasp by the looks of it. But the other situation they can come out with is it's not fair on the elderly, is it? None of this system is fair. Let's introduce a across the board universal basic income. And that, to me, is probably where it's going. They could take it in many different directions, but they'll wrap up this crime, really, it's conspiracy to do something like this as a fairness. We need fairness. We need sustainable lives. We need sustainable. Everything has to be sustainable. So everything has to be able to keep going. So then you don't have that kind of competition where some people do better than others because the amount of work they put in. Everybody is universally, I don't want to swear, universally poor or just on a level. There's a compression over everybody. So there is no getting ahead. So why would you bother? So you just stay in your lane, do your job, and they can have this system where everybody is put into their own category and you will be born into that category. I even looked at this thing called the Selfish Ledger by Google X, and it was just a brain, like a thought process, but they've got a video out there called Selfish Ledger, and it's Google, so this is going to happen in some way or form. And this basically created all of the data of all your life and stored it. So the ledger of your whole life that can categorize bloodlines, families, for generations to come. So you'll come in at a level like an Indian caste system.
By considering this data through a Lamarckian lens, the codified experiences within the ledger become an accumulation of behavioral knowledge throughout the life of an individual. By thinking of user data as multi-generational, it becomes possible for emerging users to benefit from the preceding generation's behaviors and decisions. As new users enter an ecosystem, they begin to create their own trail of data. By comparing this emergent ledger with the mass of historical user data, it becomes possible to make increasingly accurate predictions about decisions and future behaviors. As cycles of collection and comparison extend, it may be possible to develop a species-level understanding of complex issues such as depression, health, and poverty. Our ability to interpret user data, combined with the exponential growth in sensor-enabled objects, will result in an increasingly detailed account of who we are as people. As these streams of information are brought together, the effect is multiplied. New patterns become apparent and new predictions become possible.
So there's loads of ways they can go at this, mate, but it's clearly not good. You should be able to stop at some point. My dad was still working up until a year before he passed. I mean, it's too long.
Yes, no, people should be in a position where they are able to enjoy. Well, people should be able to enjoy their lives anyway. You should not be here to work, pay bills and die. That's not what we should be here to do. You should be here to try and contribute to society, absolutely. But at the moment, that's not the case. People working nearly half the year for free to give their money to the government, to blow it up the wall, for things that don't work, for streets to be less safe, for money to go to overseas wars. And it's so sad when I look at people, and I see this quite a lot. And you go to some of the supermarkets, you see some of the older ladies on the checkouts who are probably well into their 60s, late 60s, 70s, and I just find it really sad when you look and think, you shouldn't be having to do this. You should not be having to do this. You should be able to enjoy your life, and some of them may well do, and they may well love that job and that social interaction. But I don't think you should be at the point that you have to later in life. And I think just the final point on this, for young people that might be reading this story thinking, and listening to us going, okay, well, but we need to be the ones that are supported because we're the young people, we're the adults of tomorrow, we're the people who need support because we're going to be paying into the system for longer than these guys, so therefore we should be prioritized. Well, they don't care about either of you. They don't care about either of you because they'll chop and change it every 30 seconds who is the ones that matter. During the whole Brexit referendum, it was the old people that ruined it for the young. During COVID, it was the young people that ruined it for the old. They will flip-flop depending on what their narrative is, and they will demonize and they will champion whichever demographic of people gets them what they want at any given moment. They couldn't give two shits about any one of us. That's the key to remember. Not in a negative way, just remember that. Right.
Yeah. And you will be both of those things. You will also
you're going to be young. You're going to be you're going to be both of them. You're going to be both of them. And like Gaz said previously about the people that are championing certain things of the system today, no one agrees with the system on everything. And no one will agree with the system on every single thing moving forward. So you might have these climate activists that the system seems to love at the moment and that they think everything's great. Well, in the future, they'll do something that you don't like. And what happens then? Nobody is in agreement with the state on absolutely everything. So it's very important to just remember they don't care about any one of us. They will just support, attack, demonize, ostracize, champion, whichever demographic supports the cause they're trying to achieve at any given moment. At any given moment. Like for example, they've demonized, as we talked about, demonized for years, young, straight British men, particularly white British men. I guarantee if there's a war in Ukraine, they'll be championing them for a bit because they're going to want that lot on the front line and they're going to need to sell it to them. Mm-hmm. So they don't care. Very important to remember that. Speaking of war, conflict, the UK have finally done something, but not a lot. So let's talk about this.
Yeah. It's a token gesture. It's all well going in there. You're putting the fire out once it's burnt the house down. They basically got, it's been done. The job's been done in Gaza in terms of this Greater Israel project. But UK sanctions on Israel government minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, I don't know if I pronounced that right, probably not, and Bezalel Smotrich, let's call him Ken, have been imposed in a personal capacity from Downing Street. So they're personally been, and actually what is quite Orwellian about this is though, yes, we don't like those people, but what that's actually done is got us on the side of, oh, well, that's good, but you've actually personally targeted someone for their political beliefs there. Not that I agree with them. I think they're absolute lunatics and they're in a position where they should not be doing these things. I get that. But you look on the back end of that could be applied to any one of us eventually. They could freeze your assets. They could stop you going to certain countries. So although we might agree with these lunatics should be, reprimanded, jail sentences would be better than doing this. This is actually pushing the agenda in some way. So these sanctions apply to the individuals in their personal capacities. So not the country, the individual, not their ministries and departments. So it's going after the individual because of their political beliefs. That's absurd to me, whether I agree with these people or not, which I clearly don't. Ben-Gvir and Ken do not speak for all Israeli people and have a long history of dangerous extremist and inflammatory views. Can you not see what's happening there? So I think when we do this work, we've got to be very, very careful, streetwise, as your dad says, into understanding that off the back of this, they're introducing a system that could attack you and anyone else. Though we might not agree with these people, wouldn't it be better to go after their ministries and departments than the individual?
Because if they're got a long history of those kind of things, why are they in the ministry? Why are they in the government? Very, very simple. Yeah. If they are people that say things that are inflammatory and extreme, but when they say things, they don't represent the department, why are they in the department?
Yep.
Just let that process, guys, for a second. That makes literally no sense. Literally no sense whatsoever.
So, as the Israeli ambassador to the UK has said in recent interviews, their statements in their ministerial capacities do not even represent government policy. They do. Yeah, that's the point. Of course they do. Absolutely they do. You stop trying to disconnect the two when it doesn't suit your narrative. Their agenda and actions undermine the interests of Israeli people, well, they do, but they're supposed to, including security many Israelis see this. Yes, it absolutely does. But the ministry and the departments are supposed to do that. That's the point. It's at the point. So now you're picking out two people, and that goes to show that anyone who gets involved with these lunatics realize that you are just cannon fodder as well. But the technology behind that isn't what we want, being able to pick out individuals from a group of people for your political and ideological standpoints and beliefs, whether I agree with them or not. Fairness is fairness, and right is right, and wrong is wrong. That's not the right way to go about it. Go after the system, not the individual. Doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. You're right. And just to follow up on this, so the US ambassador to Israel, so we should say basically an Israeli minister, because they certainly don't care about the US, has condemned the sanctioning of these two people and urged the UK to immediately reverse their decision and stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel. Well, they've done that. They've sold them weapons and they've turned a blind eye while they've done absolute atrocities in Gaza. But it goes one step further, mate. I'm going to chuck this on you because it only just broke. He's also called for Muslim countries, doesn't go into detail as what that means, should give up their land to create a future Palestinian state. He's quoted as saying, if there's such a desire for a Palestinian state, there should be somebody that says, I'd like to host it. So again,
they have one.
Yeah, they have one. They have one. And they had one long before Israel existed in 1948.
Yeah, they had one and you flattened it. That's not the way this works.
No.
It doesn't at all. That's absurd. This is the twisted logic and the mentality of these people. They are mentally deranged, and that means the arrangement of their mentality is all over the place. They've literally put things backwards. And what you've seen there is a double bind. So they're saying the UK shouldn't be doing this. At the same time, it actually pushes the agenda in terms of the technology and surveillance, and it props up Israel as well.
It does.
So you get, this is what they do. This is like the manipulation of a psychopath, a sociopath, a narcissist. They get you in this double bind where neither of the outcomes are what you want at all.
No.
And that's what they've done. So yeah, that's absurd. Why would they? You've just flattened it. That's not how things. If no one else wants them, then why?
Exactly.
We could go on and on and on.
We could.
People are mentally ill. Yeah.
They are. Well, the key to remember is that the Israeli regime is full of psychopathic terrorist characters. Not every single person, but a large demographic. However, they have to pay lip service to the fact that they are not. So when certain individuals like these two in that story say what they're all saying in private, say it publicly, they have to pretend to be outraged, when I dread to think what is spoken about in private when it comes to the plans of the IDF, the plans of Israel in terms of what they really want to do in Gaza and the West Bank, led by an absolute psychopath in Netanyahu. That man needs to see the inside of a jail cell and nothing else for the rest of his life, as do large numbers of people in that military industrial complex over there and the government. But we will see. We will see what happens in the coming weeks and months. There's a lot of protests in Israel, isn't there, against Netanyahu? So that's what they're obviously trying to do, is associate the government with Israeli citizens in general. So if you criticize one, you're criticizing the other. And therefore you must be a Jew hater if you don't believe that Israel has the right to do what it's doing. Very much separate the citizens to the regime. I can't stand the regime here in the UK, still British, but you can criticise the regime as much as you want. It's got nothing to do with me. So apply that same logic over there. It's very, very important to separate the two. Right, good to speak to you, mate. You've got Gareth tomorrow and then your Friday on your own. I'll be back this afternoon for Trending in the Afternoon. This is the last time I'm going to be in the morning for a few days now. I'm going on holiday next week, so I'll be back Tuesday, the 24th of June in the morning. And until then, speak to you later.
See you later. Bye.